The last night of Savannah Spurlock, July 2019. The Kentucky summer heat was at its peak when Alan Sparks decided to mow his lawn. He lived in Lancaster, a small rural town where everyone knew everyone. As he pushed the mower near the fenced strawberry patch at the back of his property, Alan noticed a strange smell. Something foul, something dead. Alan knew that smell. Living on a farm, he had encountered dead animals before. Sometimes a predator would kill prey and bury it nearby. It happened. He grabbed a shovel and covered the area with fresh dirt, figuring the smell would disappear in a few days. But it didn't. A week later, the odor was even worse, unbearable. Alan mowed again, and this time noticed something disturbing. Recent rains had washed away some of the dirt, and through the soil he could see something black. Plastic. Black trash bags buried in his strawberry patch. Alan's stomach dropped. He knew about Savannah Spurlock. Everyone in Lancaster knew. The young mother who had vanished 6 months earlier. His son David had been questioned by police. They had searched the property, but they had found nothing. Could it be? Alan called his wife Alta when she got home from work. Together they walked down to the strawberry patch. With his shovel, Alan carefully dug around the black plastic. More bags appeared. Packing tape, a small rug, and flies. So many flies. They covered everything back up and returned to the house. They needed to call the police. But they didn't call 911 directly. First, they called their attorney. This story doesn't begin here, in the summer, with a horrifying discovery in a strawberry patch. It begins 6 months earlier, on a cold January night, when a young mother made a decision that would change everything. A simple decision. One night of fun. Just one night to forget her problems and feel young again. But that night would be her last. January 2019, Richmond, Kentucky. Savannah Marie Spurlock was 23 years old and drowning. At 23, she had already lived enough to seem much older. 4 children, 4 kids depending on her. And the most recent blow had been devastating. 5 weeks earlier, Savannah had given birth to twins. She didn't know they were twins. The doctors didn't know. Nobody knew until the moment of delivery. Imagine the shock. You walk into the delivery room expecting 1 baby and leave with 2. But the twin surprise was just the beginning of a series of traumatic events. Something happened at that hospital. Something Savannah never discussed publicly, but something serious enough that her ex-boyfriend took the newborns home while she returned to her mother Ellen's house, alone, separated from her own babies, drowning in postpartum confusion. Just 2 weeks after the twins' birth, Savannah made a mistake that would make everything worse. Police pulled her over for driving under the influence, a DUI charge, a criminal case, and a court date set for Monday, January 7th, 2019. The walls were closing in. 4 children, 2 newborns she wasn't seeing, an ex-boyfriend with temporary custody, a pending criminal charge, and her mother Ellen watching with that mixture of worry and disappointment that only mothers can convey. Thursday, January 3rd, 2019. Savannah was suffocating. She needed to get out, needed to breathe, needed to feel young again, even if just for one night. One night where she wasn't a mother, wasn't a criminal defendant, where she could just be Savannah, a 23-year-old girl having fun. She told her mother a simple lie. She was borrowing the car to pick up some food. She'd only be gone a little while, but Savannah had already made other plans. She had arranged to meet her friend, Jocelyn Hutch. They would drive to Lexington, about 25 miles away, and meet up with another friend, Dion Johnson, for Thursday drink specials. No responsibilities, no judgment, just one night to forget. Savannah dressed carefully that evening. She knew how to turn heads when she wanted to. She grabbed a small clutch purse, leaving her large bag locked inside her mother's car. Even though it was January in Kentucky with freezing temperatures, she didn't bother with a coat. They'd be inside bars all night anyway. That decision, not taking a coat, would become a detail that security cameras would capture later. A detail that would show just how vulnerable she was. That same Thursday evening, on the other side of town, 3 men were making their own plans. Plans that, on the surface, seemed equally innocent. David Sparks, 24 years old, Brandon Lewis, Isaiah Thompson, co-workers at a local factory. Their work week had ended, and they wanted to blow off steam. Cheap drinks, loud music, maybe meet some girls, nothing complicated, just 3 guys in their 20s looking for a good time. On the surface, David Sparks seemed absolutely normal, even boring, quiet, socially awkward, the kind of guy who fades into the background. His co-workers barely knew him despite working together. He was just there. David attended church with his parents. His uncle was a pastor. He had recently moved into a rental house in Lancaster, an even smaller rural town than Richmond. Everything about him screamed normal, safe, forgettable. But David Sparks was carrying a secret he had written in a journal hidden in his bedside table. Words that would reveal not a normal man, but a monster, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Let me read you some of the things David Sparks wrote in his own handwriting. These aren't speculations. These aren't theories. These are his words. He wrote, "How do you explain the feeling of nothingness to a normal person? That death befalling all those around you has no effect." David wrote about feeling nothing. While people died around him, he felt nothing. Zero empathy, zero remorse, zero humanity. He continued, "I felt so alone, so damaged that I've created fake personas around everyone I know, hoping to fit in, to feel accepted. It only makes me angrier." He was pretending to be human, studying behaviors, copying emotions, like an alien trying to pass as human, and it was working. Everyone around him thought he was just a quiet guy, maybe a bit strange, but harmless. He wrote, "I keep the dark, true side of myself hidden in the deepest places of my mind and have done so successfully for years. Hell, my whole life." Then came the most damning passage. The words that, in hindsight, sound like a confession to a crime not yet committed. How do you look your mother in the eyes and tell her you are a born psychopath, that she gave birth to a monster, someone who wouldn't care a bit to squeeze the last breath of life out of another human, or to plunge a knife into their chest and smile about it? Smile about it. He wrote, "Smile about it." David Sparks knew exactly what he was, and he was waiting for the perfect victim, someone vulnerable, someone alone, someone with no defenses. That Thursday night, January 3rd, 2019, David Sparks was about to find exactly what he had been looking for. The three men started their evening at Two Keys Tavern in downtown Lexington, but a steep cover charge sent them searching for alternatives. They ended up at a place called The Other Bar, settling into a corner with Jack and Cokes, scanning the crowd for possibilities. 1 in the morning. Savannah and Jocelyn arrived at the same bar. The pre-gaming had done its job. Savannah was already tipsy, loose, ready to have fun. They ordered drinks, took photos, laughed too loud. It was exactly the night Savannah needed. For a few hours, she wasn't a mother. She wasn't a criminal defendant. She was nothing but a 23-year-old girl having fun. Another friend, Kayla Hamilton, joined them briefly before calling it a night and heading home around 2 in the morning. She had work tomorrow, adult responsibilities. She said goodbye, not knowing she was saying goodbye to Savannah forever. Shortly after Kayla left, Dion Johnson departed too. He had court the next morning and couldn't afford to be late or hungover. He asked if Savannah and Jocelyn wanted a ride. They declined. "We're having fun," Savannah said. "We'll figure it out." Dion left without knowing he had just taken away another layer of protection from Savannah. Now there were just two, and soon there would be only one. 2:30 in the morning. Savannah and Jocelyn got into an argument, voices raised, hands gesturing. The bar's bouncers had to separate them, warning both women to quiet down or leave. Jocelyn had enough. She was ready to go home. She found a ride and left around 2:30 in the morning. Savannah promised she could make it home fine on her own. She'd figure something out. For the first time that night, Savannah was completely alone. Her friends were gone. She was drunk. She was in a city that wasn't her own, and she was about to make the worst decision of her life. Across the bar, 3 men were on their second round of Jack and Coke. David Sparks, Brandon Lewis, Isaiah Thompson. They had been talking, scanning the room, waiting for something interesting to happen. And then something did. Savannah approached their table. She was flirting, forward, confident, beautiful, exactly what they had hoped to find when they came out that night. But for David Sparks, Savannah was more than that. She was the opportunity he had been waiting for his entire life, the defenseless victim he had written about in his journal. Last call approached. The bar would close soon. The 3 men suggested continuing the party elsewhere. Brandon had just moved from South Carolina and was staying with family. His place was out. Isaiah had recently moved into an apartment but hadn't bought furniture yet. That left only one option, David's house in Lancaster, 40 miles away, in the middle of rural nowhere, far from everything, far from everyone. 3:30 in the morning. A security camera in a nearby parking garage captured the group leaving together. Savannah walked between the 3 men. She was steady on her feet but visibly intoxicated. She wore no coat despite the freezing January temperature. This would be the last confirmed video footage of Savannah Spurlock alive. The group split into 2 vehicles. Brandon and Isaiah took Savannah in Isaiah's Nissan Pathfinder, taking a slightly longer route to David's house. David drove alone in his black Chevrolet pickup truck, taking a different route. As Savannah rode through the dark Kentucky countryside in Isaiah's vehicle, her phone rang. FaceTime. It was her mother. Ellen Spurlock had been trying to reach her for hours, growing increasingly worried and angry. Where was her daughter? What was she doing? Savannah finally answered the call. Ellen would later tell investigators she could see Savannah was in someone else's car. She caught a glimpse of one of the two men Savannah was with. The background showed rural roads, farmland, nothing familiar. "Where are you?" Ellen demanded. "What are you doing?" Savannah assured her mother she was fine. She'd get a ride back to the car in the morning. Don't worry, she'd be home soon. Then she ended the call and switched her phone to airplane mode so her mother couldn't track her location or call back. That FaceTime call would haunt Ellen Spurlock for months. It was the last time she would see her daughter's face, the last time she would hear her voice. If only she had pressed harder. If only she had demanded Savannah tell her exactly where she was going. If only. 4:30 in the morning. The group arrived at David's rental house in Lancaster. The small home sat in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by farmland and rural properties. David's parents lived nearby on a property that included their home, outbuildings, and a fenced strawberry patch. Inside David's house, the group continued drinking. David produced a bottle of Crown Royal whiskey. He and Savannah went shot for shot while Brandon and Isaiah paced themselves since they had to drive home. Music played. Savannah danced. The atmosphere seemed light, fun, exactly what everyone had wanted when they set out that evening. But then the dynamic shifted. During his later interrogation, Brandon would describe in explicit detail how each of the three men took turns going into David's bedroom with Savannah. There was kissing, touching, physical contact. According to Brandon, no one had actual intercourse with her. She was willing at first, participating, enjoying the attention. As dawn approached, Savannah began to fade. The alcohol hit her hard. She went from flirtatious to drowsy, from coherent to incoherent. Around 5:30 in the morning, she started dozing off on David's love seat recliner, dipping in and out of consciousness. David and Isaiah helped her back to David's bedroom, one man on each side supporting her weight. They laid her on David's queen-sized bed, fully clothed. She was drunk, barely conscious, unable to protest or participate in anything. David closed the bedroom door and turned off the lights. Brandon and Isaiah hung around for another 15 or 20 minutes. As they prepared to leave, Isaiah expressed a concern that would haunt him for months. "Are you sure we should leave her here?" Isaiah asked Brandon as they walked toward the door. "Why?" Brandon responded. "I don't know," Isaiah said. "David really wanted to. Really wanted to." Isaiah felt something. Some primitive instinct told him something wasn't right, but Brandon brushed off the concern. What David did or didn't do after they left wasn't their problem. Savannah was passed out. The night was over. They left David's house around 6 in the morning, driving back to Lexington in Isaiah's Pathfinder, leaving Savannah behind, unconscious, defenseless, alone with a man who had written in his journal about squeezing the last breath from another person and smiling about it. David Sparks would later claim he fell asleep on his love seat recliner around 6:15 that morning, exhausted from drinking and the long night. He told investigators that Savannah woke him around 9:30, asking for his address so she could call for a ride. He gave it to her, then dozed off again while she went back into the bedroom. When he woke again around 11:30, Savannah was gone. His front door was unlocked. She had vanished. But security footage from a neighbor's camera told a very different story. The footage showed David loading large black trash bags into the bed of his pickup truck early that morning. He made multiple trips carrying heavy bags from his house to the truck. Then he drove away. What was in those bags? What was David Sparks disposing of while he claimed to be sleeping peacefully on his recliner? When investigators later searched David's house, it was immaculate. Everything in its place. No dishes in the sink. No clutter. One officer noted that the bottom half of every wall appeared to have been recently wiped down. The house had the sterile feeling of a crime scene that someone had frantically tried to clean. What happened during those hours when David Sparks and Savannah Spurlock were alone in that house? David would never fully explain, but the evidence would eventually tell the story his words refused to reveal. Back in Richmond, Ellen Spurlock's worry had escalated to panic. Saturday evening, January 5th, one of Savannah's friends found Ellen's car parked across from Dion Johnson's house, where it had been left 2 nights earlier. Savannah's large purse was still locked inside, containing her identification, money, and personal belongings. The car showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. Ellen contacted Richmond police and canceled the stolen vehicle report she had filed Thursday night. But now she had a bigger problem. Her daughter had been gone for more than 48 hours with no contact, no social media updates, no texts. Sunday came and went with no word from Savannah, No posts appeared on her Facebook or Instagram accounts. Her phone remained in airplane mode, unreachable. Monday, January 7th arrived, the day Savannah was supposed to appear in court for her DUI charge. Ellen knew then that something was terribly wrong. Savannah would never have missed that court date willingly. The consequences would be severe. She would have shown up, no matter what. Monday evening, Ellen filed an official missing persons report with Richmond Police Department. Savannah's face immediately appeared on local news broadcasts and social media. Friends shared her photo thousands of times. The community mobilized, organizing search parties and distributing flyers. Law enforcement agencies across central Kentucky coordinated their efforts. Richmond Police, Lexington Police, Kentucky State Police, and multiple county sheriff's departments joined the search. The security footage from the parking garage became crucial evidence, showing Savannah leaving the other bar with 3 unidentified men. Within days, tips from the public identified them: David Sparks, Brandon Lewis, Isaiah Thompson. They were brought in for questioning separately. Law enforcement obtained search warrants for David's house, his truck, and all 3 men's cell phones. Brandon spoke first, providing explicit details about the night. He admitted to the drinking, the flirtation, the physical contact with Savannah in David's bedroom. He confirmed that Savannah had been extremely intoxicated, barely conscious when they put her in David's bed. He acknowledged his conversation with Isaiah about whether they should leave her alone with David. "She was out," Brandon told investigators, "like a dead stick. She was cold. I'm talking about unconscious. Was she alive when you left the house?" an investigator asked. "Yeah, most definitely. I know she was alive." But Brandon couldn't vouch for what happened after he and Isaiah left. He hadn't been there. He admitted that Isaiah had expressed concerns about leaving Savannah with David. He acknowledged that David had really wanted to have sex with her, but he insisted he'd had no part in whatever came next. Isaiah's interrogation covered similar ground. He confirmed the timeline, the drinking, the physical contact. He described David as quiet, awkward, a loner who kept to himself at work. When investigators pressed him about whether David could have hurt Savannah, Isaiah struggled to answer. "I don't think he would," Isaiah said uncertainly. "But is it possible?" the investigator asked. "I can't point a finger at it for something I don't know," Isaiah replied. The cell phone records for Brandon and Isaiah showed their phones pinging off towers along the route from Lancaster back to Lexington in the early morning hours of January 4th, exactly as they'd claimed. A forensic examination of Isaiah's Pathfinder revealed no evidence of foul play. Their stories checked out. They had left Savannah alive at David's house and driven home. David Sparks was questioned multiple times. He surrendered his cell phone and allowed the search of his house and truck. His story remained consistent. Savannah had been alive and well when Brandon and Isaiah left. He'd fallen asleep on his recliner. She'd woken him around 9:30 to ask for his address. He dozed off again. When he woke around 11:30, she was gone. But investigators weren't buying it. The neighbor's security footage contradicted his story. The overly clean house raised red flags. And then there was the journal. The search of David's house revealed disturbing evidence. In a drawer beside his bed, investigators found multiple firearms, including a .308 rifle and a Derringer pistol. The same drawer contained an assortment of knives and a large supply of condoms. Blood spatters appeared on the bedroom walls and several door frames throughout the house. Forensic technicians carefully swabbed and photographed each spot. The samples were sent to the state crime lab for DNA analysis. But the most chilling discovery was that notebook, the journal containing David's handwritten entries, the words of a man who knew exactly what kind of monster he was. His attorney would later claim these entries were written during a period of deep depression and didn't reflect his actual personality or intentions. But investigators couldn't ignore the eerie parallel between David's written fantasies and Savannah's disappearance. He had written about wanting to kill, about being a psychopath, about squeezing the life from another human and smiling about it. And now a young woman who had been alone with him was missing. Weeks turned into months with no sign of Savannah. The state crime lab processed all the evidence from David's house. The DNA from the blood spatters matched neither David nor Savannah. Investigators theorized the blood came from a previous tenant. David had only moved into the rental house 5 weeks before Savannah's disappearance. The blood evidence led nowhere. Searches of the local landfill with cadaver dogs turned up nothing. Police canvassed the countryside around Lancaster, checking abandoned buildings, drainage ditches, wooded areas. Nothing. The investigation expanded to include David's parents' property adjacent to his rental house. Investigators searched the main house, the outbuildings, and approximately 1 acre of surrounding land. They found nothing suspicious. David moved back in with his parents after the searches. He continued working at his factory job. Brandon and Isaiah tried to move forward with their lives, haunted by the question of whether they could have prevented what happened if they'd insisted Savannah leave with them that morning. Savannah's mother, Ellen, appeared on national television, pleading for information. "I believe she could have been taken against her will," Ellen told ABC News, her voice breaking. "This is the worst nightmare. We're leaning on our faith in God and each other, our family, our friends." She spoke directly to her missing daughter. "Savannah, I would say to her, please come home to your family and friends. We miss you. We love you more than you will ever know." The twins went to live with their father along with Savannah's 2 older children, 4 children growing up without their mother. Ellen kept Savannah's room exactly as she'd left it, unable to accept that her daughter might never come home. 6 months passed. January turned to February, February to March, March to April. Still nothing. No body, no evidence, no answers. The case was going cold. Investigators had exhausted every lead. David Sparks had a solid alibi supported by his own claims and the lack of physical evidence. Without a body, without witnesses, without proof, there was nothing they could charge him with. Summer arrived in Kentucky, bringing heat and humidity to the rural farmland around Lancaster, and that's when Alan Sparks smelled something foul while mowing his lawn near the strawberry patch. July 10th, 2019. Alan and Alta Sparks' attorney called the Richmond Police Department. There was a suspicious smell and buried plastic bags in the Sparks family strawberry patch. The police needed to investigate immediately. Richmond police immediately notified Kentucky State Police. A search warrant was obtained within hours. Local and state investigators rushed to the Sparks property, securing the scene. The FBI dispatched 11 agents to assist with the excavation and evidence collection. This was it. After 6 months, they finally had something. As law enforcement descended on his parents' property, David Sparks drove himself to the Richmond Police Department. He parked his car in the lot, tossed his keys into the back seat, locked the door, and walked inside. At the front desk, he announced that he was going to need a lawyer. He knew. Somehow, he knew what they had found. At the strawberry patch, investigators carefully excavated the burial site. Just 19 inches beneath the surface, they found 3 large black plastic trash bags. Inside was a small accent rug, and wrapped within the rug was Savannah Spurlock's body. She was naked. Her feet had been bound together at the ankles with clear packing tape. Her body had been folded in half to fit inside the bags. An animal had torn a small hole in one corner of the plastic, creating the opening through which the smell of decomposition escaped. Without that animal, without that small tear, Savannah might have remained buried for years. The July heat and 6 months of burial had caused extensive decomposition. Insects and animals had damaged the remains. The state medical examiner would later determine that establishing an exact cause of death was impossible due to the condition of the body. However, the manner of death was ruled a homicide based on the circumstances, the burial location, the attempt at concealment, the unnatural positioning, and the binding of the victim. 19 inches. That's how deep Savannah had been buried, just 19 inches below the surface of the strawberry patch. Police had searched the property 6 months earlier. They had been right there, walking over the ground where Savannah lay dead and discarded like garbage, but they hadn't dug. They hadn't known. A search of David's bedroom at his parents' house produced damning evidence. Investigators found rolls of black plastic trash bags identical to those used to wrap Savannah's body. They found rubber gloves, and critically, they found a roll of clear packing tape. During Savannah's autopsy, forensic technicians carefully unrolled approximately 3 yards of packing tape that had been used to bind her ankles. The ragged edge where the tape had been torn from the roll was preserved. It was crucial evidence. Back at the crime lab, forensic examiners compared the ragged edge from Savannah's ankles to the ragged edge on the roll of tape found in David's room. They matched perfectly. The tape that bound Savannah Spurlock had come from David Sparks' bedroom. It was physical evidence, irrefutable, a direct connection between David and the murder that he could never explain away. Investigators also found a backpack in David's closet. Forensic testing revealed tiny amounts of blood on the fabric. DNA analysis showed the blood contained genetic material from both David Sparks and Savannah Spurlock. Their DNA mixed together on a backpack hidden in his closet. Another piece of the puzzle. Another proof of the undeniable. David Sparks was arrested and charged with murder, tampering with physical evidence and abuse of a corpse. He sat in jail awaiting trial for months while prosecutors built their case. The evidence was overwhelming. The trash bags, the tape, the DNA, the neighbor's security footage showing him loading bags into his truck, the overly clean house, the journal revealing his violent fantasies. All of it pointed to one conclusion. David Sparks had murdered Savannah Spurlock and buried her body in his parents' strawberry patch. In the end, David chose to plead guilty rather than face trial. He never explained why he killed Savannah. He never described what happened during those dark hours when they were alone in his house. He never showed remorse. He never apologized to her family. He simply admitted that he had murdered her and buried her body. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office agreed to a 50-year sentence for the murder charge, with an additional 12 years for tampering with evidence and 12 months for abuse of a corpse. All sentences would run concurrently, meaning David would serve 50 years total. He would be eligible for parole in 2039 when he is 44 years old. Prosecutors explained that they accepted the plea deal rather than seeking life without parole or the death penalty because they couldn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that aggravating circumstances existed in the killing. Without a clear cause of death and without David's confession about his methods, they feared a jury might not deliver the harshest sentence. A bird in the hand was worth 2 in the bush. 50 years was better than risking an acquittal or a lighter sentence. Savannah's family attended the sentencing hearing. Ellen Spurlock stood face to face with the man who had murdered her daughter and buried her like garbage in a vegetable garden. She spoke of the unbearable pain of losing Savannah, of the 6 months of desperate searching, of the horror of learning her daughter had been buried just 19 inches underground while investigators searched nearby, of nights spent wondering if Savannah was alive somewhere, suffering, calling out for help that would never come. David Sparks showed no emotion during the hearing. His face was blank, empty. Exactly as he had described himself in his journal. He offered no apology. He provided no explanation. He gave Savannah's family no closure, no answers, no peace. He simply accepted his sentence and was led away in handcuffs. Today, David Sparks serves his sentence at the Southeastern State Correctional Complex in Wheelwright, Kentucky. He will be eligible for parole in 2039. Whether he will ever be released remains to be seen. Prison records show he has been a model inmate, keeping to himself, causing no trouble. Just as he did on the outside. Quiet, forgettable, normal. The perfect disguise for a monster. Brandon Lewis and Isaiah Thompson were never charged with any crimes. They cooperated fully with investigators and their stories never changed. They were consistent from the first interview to the last. While they made questionable decisions that night by leaving an intoxicated woman alone with a man they barely knew, they committed no crime. Morally questionable? Perhaps. Legally culpable? No. But they have to live with it. Isaiah expressed concern about leaving Savannah with David. He said David really wanted to have sex with her. He felt something was wrong, but he got in the car and drove away anyway. Brandon dismissed Isaiah's concerns as not their problem. They left her there, and she died. Could they have prevented it? Would David have let her go if they had insisted? These are questions Brandon and Isaiah will carry for the rest of their lives. Savannah Spurlock's 4 children grew up without their mother. The twins have no memory of the woman who gave birth to them just weeks before her death. They will never know her voice, her laugh, her touch. Her older children carry the trauma of losing their mother to violence when they were young. They have to live with the knowledge that their mother went out for one night of fun and never came home, that a monster decided she was the perfect victim. The case highlighted the dangers young women face when drinking with strangers, particularly when friends separate and someone is left alone with men they've just met. It raised questions about the bystander effect and moral responsibility. Should Brandon and Isaiah have insisted that Savannah leave with them? Should they have called her family to pick her up? Should they have refused to go to David's house in the first place? These questions have no easy answers, but they're worth asking. Most haunting is the question of why. Why did David Sparks kill Savannah Spurlock? His journal entries suggest he had fantasized about murder for years. He had written about being a psychopath, about wanting to kill, about needing to hide his true self from the world. But fantasizing about something and actually doing it are two very different things. What pushed David across that line? What made that night different from all the other nights he had been alone with potential victims? The truth is, Savannah was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong person. She was vulnerable, intoxicated, alone. For David, she became the perfect victim, the opportunity he had been waiting for. She couldn't fight back. She couldn't escape. She couldn't even stay awake. And David, who had spent his entire life pretending to be normal while hiding the monster within, finally let that monster out. What happened in those hours when they were alone? David never said, but we can piece it together from the evidence. Savannah was unconscious on his bed. Brandon and Isaiah left. David was alone with her. He had written about wanting to kill, about squeezing the life from another human, about plunging a knife into someone's chest and smiling about it. And now he had the perfect opportunity Did he kill her immediately? Did he wait for her to wake up? Did she ever regain consciousness, realizing the danger she was in? We'll never know. David took those answers to prison with him. What we do know is that at some point during those morning hours, Savannah Spurlock died in David Sparks' house. Her death was violent enough that David felt the need to completely clean the house afterward, to wipe down walls, to make it look like nothing had happened there. He wrapped her naked body in a small rug. He bound her feet with packing tape. He folded her body in half and stuffed her into 3 black trash bags. Then he loaded those bags into his truck and drove to his parents' property. He dug a shallow grave in their strawberry patch, just 19 inches deep. He buried her there, covered her with dirt, and went on with his life as if nothing had happened. For 6 months, David Sparks lived normally. He went to work. He talked to police. He allowed them to search his house. He played the role of the concerned citizen who had nothing to hide. All while Savannah's body decomposed in his parents' backyard. All while her mother appeared on television begging for information. All while her children waited for her to come home. The investigation into Savannah's disappearance and the eventual discovery of her body demonstrated the critical importance of forensic evidence, persistent investigation, and witnesses who come forward. Without the security footage from the parking garage, the 3 men might never have been identified. Without Brandon and Isaiah's cooperation, investigators might never have established the timeline and known that Savannah was last seen alive at David's house. And without Alan and Alta Sparks reporting what they found in their garden, Savannah's body might have remained buried for years, perhaps forever. But even with all that evidence, even with David's guilty plea, there are still unanswered questions. What exactly did David do to Savannah? How did she die? Did she suffer? These are questions her family will never have answered. David took those answers with him to prison, and he'll never tell. That silence is perhaps his final cruelty. Not just taking Savannah's life, but taking away her family's chance for complete closure. Ellen Spurlock continues to honor her daughter's memory. She speaks out about the case, advocates for missing persons' families, and works to keep Savannah's story alive. She wants the world to remember that Savannah was more than just a victim. She was a mother, a daughter, a friend. She made mistakes that last night, but she didn't deserve what happened to her. No one does. Savannah made poor decisions that night. She lied to her mother. She got drunk. She got in a car with strangers. She went to a man's house she'd just met. These were mistakes, bad judgment. But they weren't crimes deserving of a death sentence. Millions of young people make similar decisions every weekend and go home safe. Savannah's mistake was encountering a predator who had been waiting his entire life for someone exactly like her. The strawberry patch where Savannah was buried has been removed. The Sparks family sold the property and moved away. They couldn't stay there. How could they? How could Alan Sparks ever work in his yard again, knowing his son had buried a girl's body there? How could Alta Sparks ever look at that ground without seeing the horror of what had been hidden beneath it? They had lived there for years, walked over that patch countless times, never knowing what lay beneath their feet. The community of Lancaster, Kentucky will never forget. It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone. And now everyone knows that one of their own was a monster hiding in plain sight. David Sparks, the quiet guy from church. David Sparks, whose uncle was a pastor. David Sparks, who seemed so normal. He was a killer, a murderer, a psychopath who had been documenting his violent fantasies in a journal while everyone around him thought he was just shy. It makes you wonder how many other David Sparkses are out there. How many other quiet, awkward men are hiding monsters beneath the surface? How many other people are creating fake personas, pretending to be human, waiting for the perfect victim? It's a disturbing thought, but it's a necessary one. Because monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like your coworker, your neighbor, the guy at church. Savannah Spurlock lived 23 years. She left 4 children. She faced struggles and made mistakes. She was human, flawed, real. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't a saint, but she deserved to live. She deserved to see her children grow up. She deserved more than to be murdered and buried in a strawberry patch by a man who saw her as nothing more than an opportunity to live out his violent fantasies. On January 4th, 2019, at 3:30 in the morning, a security camera captured Savannah Spurlock walking into a parking garage. She was laughing, smiling, having fun. She had less than 3 hours left to live. She didn't know it. She couldn't have known it. She thought she was just going to have some drinks, have some fun, and go home in the morning. Instead, she encountered David Sparks, and David Sparks had been waiting for her. This is the story of Savannah Spurlock, a young mother who made a mistake and paid for it with her life. A woman who was more than a victim, more than a statistic, more than a tragic story. She was real. She mattered. and she should still be here. Rest in peace, Savannah Marie Spurlock, 1995 to 2019. Gone but never forgotten. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous situation, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, can be reached at 1-800-656-4673. You are not alone. Help is available. This case reminds us to look out for each other, to speak up when something feels wrong, to not dismiss our instincts when they tell us someone is in danger. Isaiah Thompson felt something was wrong about leaving Savannah with David. He said so out loud, but he got in the car and left anyway. What if he had insisted? What if Brandon had listened? What if they had called someone to pick Savannah up? We'll never know. But we can learn from it. We can do better. We can be the person who speaks up, who insists, who refuses to walk away when someone is in danger. Savannah's story is a tragedy, but it doesn't have to be meaningless. We can honor her memory by being more aware, more protective, more willing to intervene when we see someone vulnerable. We can teach young people about the dangers of getting too intoxicated in public, of going places with strangers, of separating from friends. We can have uncomfortable conversations about predators and how they operate. We can acknowledge that monsters exist, and they don't always look like monsters. David Sparks will spend the rest of his life in prison, but Savannah Spurlock will never get to spend another day with her children. That's the real tragedy. Not that a monster was caught and punished, but that a young woman had to die for it to happen. That 4 children had to lose their mother. That a family had to endure 6 months of agony before getting answers. That shouldn't be the cost of justice, but too often it is. Remember Savannah. Remember her story. And remember that every person you meet is someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone's friend. Everyone matters. Everyone deserves safety. Everyone deserves to go home at the end of the night. Rest in peace, Savannah. You deserve so much better.